Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Lily. I am so happy you're here with me today. In today's video, I have a super fun and super easy junk journal project for you. We are going to make a super easy junk journal cover by repurposing a cereal box. This is nothing new. I've been doing this for a while, but in today's video, we are going to cover it with fabric. Let me show you what we are going to start with. So I have this cereal box right here. This is just a sample because I've already used the one that we are going to be working with today. But it is just a simple cereal box, just like this one. If you don't have a cereal box, you can always use similar packaging. So I've already kind of flattened this one out, and I'm going to show you in just a moment how I store my cereal boxes. So let me set this one down and show you what inspired me to work on one today. Back in 2017, I made a Christmas junk journal, and this was actually prompted by my sister, who thought it would be a good idea for us to do like a December daily. So this was the very first Christmas journal that I worked on, and it was made from a cereal box and beautiful holiday fabric. And it just feels so good in my hand. As soon as I get over to the craft table, I will show you an up close look of this junk journal cover. All right, look at that. Oh my gosh, it feels so good and chunky. Let me set this down. I now want to show you the one that I made off camera. I always like to create one of the projects off camera so that I iron out the wrinkles so that there are no hiccups. No pun intended, we are working with fabric. But here is the one I made off camera. Doesn't this look absolutely gorgeous? Of course, it's in my favorite shade of turquoise, and then it has a beautiful floral pattern. So this is fabric. And can you believe this was a cereal box? Oh my gosh, look at the inside. So I'm only going to show you this right now because I will give you a full view of the junk journal as soon as I get over to the craft table. But look at how gorgeous. So we are going to recreate this junk journal. And if you want to join me, let me tell you all of the supplies that you need. It should be super basic. Grab yourself an empty cereal box or similar packaging, some of your favorite fabric, and then some fun scrapbooking paper, preferably a heavier cardstock, and some glue. Glue stick. I recommend glue stick. And maybe some tacky glue, maybe Aleene's tacky glue. That's it. I want you to shop your stash. I would love for you to create a junk journal cover with me using supplies that you already have in your stash so you don't have to go out and get anything. Are you ready to get started? But before I go over to the Crafty Loft, let me show you how I store my flattened cereal boxes and also my fabric. Let's go. I found that the easiest way to store the flattened cereal boxes is in this upright file holder organizer. So as soon as I get a cereal box, I flatten and just store it upright. And then over here is where I keep all of my fabrics. This is a unit that I purchased at Costco, and I like to store my fabrics Marie Kondo style. And this unit, all 4 drawers are specifically for fabric. I hope you find this helpful. Now that I'm on the craft table, let me show you what inspired me to create a fabric-covered cereal box junk journal. That was a mouthful. And it was this 2017 Christmas junk journal. I'm not going to do an entire flip through, and I can't recall if I did or not. I'll have to go search through my video archives and see if I have this on my channel. If I don't, I may do one towards the end of the year. So this is how I began to create junk journal covers, by reusing cereal boxes or packaging and then covering with beautiful fabric. When I reached for this journal, and I did it because someone had asked me for a recipe that I keep in this journal, so I grabbed it to pull a copy of the recipe. And it just felt so good in my hands. And I thought to myself, why am I not making more of these journal covers? They are super easy and so pretty. And I've got tons of fabric that I would like to use. So I really, really was inspired to create a new journal based off of this one. And I've been making journals now for about 10 years, and this is how it started. I used to also make these wine cork charms, and this one is about 10 years old. But I love repurposing the wine corks, and I was influenced to do these when I saw a picture on Pinterest, and I just love them. I should probably begin making more of those. And I don't think it's because we stop liking what we're doing, but our projects evolve into new things, and there are so many new ways of doing things and so many things to learn. Like I told one of my good friends the other day, so many projects, not enough hours in the day. So let's take it back to 10 years ago when I began making this style of journal. Now, I've become more handy with my journal making, and so the process will be so much smoother and so easy. I think you will definitely enjoy this. All you need is a cereal box, some pretty fabric, and some pretty scrapbooking paper. Some fun, because you want this to be whimsical, colorful, especially if that is your style. Use the things that you love. And I'm hoping that this doesn't cost you any money. We are going to reuse supplies that we already have. Super important. Let's shop our stash. You've been gathering things. I've been hoarding things. Let's use all the beautiful things. I'm going to begin by grabbing this oversized cereal box. And like I mentioned earlier, I recruit my family, my daughters, my mom, even my dad has saved boxes for me. My granddaughters all save packaging for me that I can repurpose to create these amazing junk journal covers. This one is oversized, and the spine that I like to create on my journals should be under 2 inches. I don't like it any larger than 2 inches. Then it gets too bulky. Though I have in the past created really big spines. But I like anything 2 inches and under. So I am going to show you how I cut it down so that it fits the measurements that I like. It's always a good reminder, a visual reminder, to jot down the measurements that you are going to use. This is a really, really good tip because as you're cutting, you want to make sure you cut everything to the correct dimensions. And so having a visual reminder of your measurements will be very helpful. I'm getting text messages. Can you hear that in the background? Okay, hold on. I'll be right there. So I am going to cut this spine down so that it's only 2 inches wide. I've done this in the past. In fact, I will share a video for you up above. I have a couple of videos showing you how I reuse cereal boxes to make junk journal covers. My edges are wonky at the top and at the bottom, so I am using the fold or the crease as a guide, and I'm lining it up at the 2-inch mark. And now I'm just going to cut. I cut at the 2-inch mark because that's how wide I want my spine. And now the excess piece, I'm just going to overlap. Plus, it'll actually reinforce the spine just a little bit. So that is how I trim down the spine to size. If you want it smaller, then you would trim down to 1.5 inches or 1 inches. All depends on how wide. Or maybe you want a 3-inch spine. It's entirely up to you. So now that I have cut right down that spine, I now have an even straight edge. So I'm going to use that to trim the other edges. You can see how they're uneven. So I'm just going to trim a little off of that right edge. The height of my journal cover is going to be 8.5 inches. So now that I have a straight edge at the bottom, I will level it and then move it over to the 8.5 inch measurement. These are the measurements that I like to work with. You jot down and you write down the measurements that you want to work with,
and then cut accordingly. So now I have cut the height to 8.5 inches. The next step is to cut the width to 6 inches wide. I am going to use the fold mark of the spine as a guide, and I'm going to line it up to that 6-inch mark. If your journal cover was going to be longer or shorter, then you line it up to that measurement. So now I have my journal cover that is 8.5 inches tall and 6 inches wide. Well, not journal cover, but journal panel. It'll be a cover once I join the two panels together. I'm going to do the same thing with the second panel. I have a straight edge at the bottom, and I'm going to use that as my leveling guide to make sure that my cover is not wonky. I'm going to trim a little bit off of that right edge just to even it up. And then once I flip it over to make the final cut for the height, that's where I line it up to the 8.5 inch mark and then cut. And I'll have an 8.5 inch panel. The next step will just be to cut the width to 6 inches wide. And most of the time I will have a sticky note that is on my craft table as a visual reminder so I can refer to it to make sure that all of my measurements are the same. So here I'm just jotting it down on the cereal box to show you what my measurements are. Because I've done it in the past, and maybe you have too, where I'm working on a project and I don't have a measurement reference or I don't have it written down. And when I've done all my cuts, I'll do different sizes. Because I've done different sizes. I've done journals that are 9x6, 8x5. It really all depends on the size of packaging that I have. Because this is an oversized cereal box, I'm able to do my favorite size, which is 8.5x6. So now that I have the two panels, I am going to show you how I glue them together. And this is what creates that 2-inch spine and the junk journal cover itself. Do you see how I overlap? And you can overlap either way, but I'm going to keep the shorter end on the bottom. And then I am going to use a generous amount of glue. And this is the Ultimate Glue, which I really like. It is a strong adhesive, very similar to tacky glue. And I'm going to make sure that I cover that little tab with plenty of adhesive. And then I'm just going to layer the two so that it really holds. And I will use the cover itself as a guide. So I will place that 2-inch spine over that little flap. I'm going to bring up the second panel at the fold right there. And then butt the spine up against it to make sure that it's even. I'm checking the top and the bottom, making certain that everything is lined up. And then once I feel that everything is lined up, I will press it down, and I am going to grab a couple of heavy items to make sure that it stays put and it dries flat. And I left this for about 5 minutes as I gathered my fabric and my scrapbooking paper. And so now 5 minutes have passed, and it's not completely dry, but it is dry enough so that I can continue with the next steps. Oh my gosh, I woke up with such heavy allergies today, and I am trying to control the sneezing. So if you hear sneezing in the background, it is an allergy day. And wow, there's a lot of activity going on my phone. I'm getting so many messages. Okay, so excuse my allergies. I went a couple months without any seasonal allergies, but oh, they came at me with a vendetta. So this is the beautiful turquoise fabric I am going to use. I went through my fabric drawer and pulled out some fun colors. Well, they're all fun, but something I thought would really, really look pretty. I am placing it flat on my craft table, and I'm going to place the junk journal cover over as a guide so I know exactly where to cut. I'm going to place something heavy over the cardboard so that the journal cover doesn't shift, and I'm going to trim about 1 inch all the way around the cover. So my fabric will be 1 inch larger than the cardboard, than the cereal box cover. I'm not a seamstress, you guys, so and it obviously shows. So I do struggle with the scissors and cutting that fabric. I do the best I can, and it doesn't stop me from making things just because I'm not, a master at it. And I'm also going to cut a smaller strip that I'm going to use mainly to embellish the inside of the spine. So I'm going to trim a piece that is the same height of the junk journal cover, and it's going to be about 4 inches wide. And I'm just eyeballing this. I want to make sure that when I place it in the center of the inside of the cover, that it's wide enough to cover the spine. And so I use that as a guide. The inside of the spine as a guide to make sure that that little strip of fabric is wide enough. And I'm looking at both sides of this fabric, and both look really good. One of them is much more vibrant than the other side, but I really like the way the negative side has a lot more of the highlights, but I chose to keep the brighter tone on the outside of the journal. To glue my fabric to the cover, I have chosen glue stick. This is a glue stick that I picked up last summer when I was in Mexico, and any glue stick will work. This one, I'm just using it because I don't want it to dry out, and it says that it's really good for textiles and paper mainly. And I am being really generous with the glue. I want to make sure that I don't miss any spots. This way, the fabric adheres to the cardboard nice and evenly. So I'll go over it a couple times, and I'll kind of lean my head over and have the light shine on that cardboard and the glue so I can see where I've missed a few spots. And then I just go over it again. Again, I'm being very generous with the glue. I feel that this is the best to stick the fabric on the cover. I've used Mod Podge in the past, but it seeps through the fabric, and then I don't like the look because it looks kind of blotchy. So no Mod Podge. I've also used the fabric tack in the past, but it doesn't spread evenly. It's a good glue for fabric, but where I'm covering up an entire cover, the glue stick has been my favorite. You could obviously try out different glues, whatever works for you. If you've done this in the past and you have a different adhesive that works best for you, let me know down below, because I'd like to know. But this works really well, and I used glue stick on the 2017 journal. I've also used, but I would have to go outside, spray adhesive. Elmer's spray adhesive works really well, but you have to take your work outside, and then it's an aerosol glue, so you have to spray it evenly and work quickly to stick your fabric down. I didn't want to go outside. If I'm suffering from seasonal allergies in my house, can you imagine how much worse it would be outside? This scraper is super handy because it helps me make sure I spread everything evenly. But then if you don't have a scraper, just use your hands to make sure there's no anything lumpy, no bumps, that everything is nice and smooth and spread out evenly. I am now going to miter the corners. Is that the right term? Miter? What I'm doing right now is cutting the corners of all 4 sides of the junk journal, just a little bit above the corner, because I am going to fold those corners or all the sides over. When I was in high school, even in junior high, we had to cover our textbooks. And I always, every time I go to cover a junk journal like this, I always remember having to use, and we used grocery bag to cover our textbooks. And this is exactly how we did it. Of course, without using glue, because we couldn't glue the cardboard bag or the grocery bag onto our textbook. But this is how we made our junk journals once we covered our textbooks. And so I remember that, and it was so fun. We would get so creative with our textbook covers. Our high school and junior high even sold craft paper covers for our textbooks. But we would get so creative, and it was fun, and we would all personalize them. And I think maybe that was the beginning of, my junk journal journey back when I was 13, 14 years old. Who would have thought I'd be making more covers? But it's so much fun. I've always loved working with paper crafts. I've always loved DIY projects and upcycling and repurposing. I have worked with cereal boxes and plastic packaging since I was in high school. And so it's always been one of my favorite things to do, to use up, junky materials and create beautiful things. There was a small fabric store in the city I grew up in. I went to high school in a school called Southgate High School, and I graduated from Southgate High School in 1987. And in Southgate on Tweedy Boulevard, there was a fabric store, and oh my gosh, I loved going in there. And then across the street was a Miller's Outpost, and then there was Allen's Record Shop down the street. Not Allen's. There was Allen's movie theater. The record shop was Yuri's Record Shop, which was a friend's family that owned it. So all the fun things were on Tweedy Boulevard in Southgate. But that fabric store, I just absolutely loved it. And after I graduated from high school, I frequented that shop because I tried making my own clothes for a while. And the only class I ever took, a sewing class, was in junior high. But that was all I needed to do a straight stitch and, combine things and make things. I made a whale stuffed animal pillow when I was in junior high. I also made a camouflage backpack, and I loved that backpack. It was so much fun. So I loved sewing. I should have pursued some type of, sewing career, like in fashion design, because my best friends and I, we would make our own like heavy metal clothing when we were in high school. Oh my gosh, if you could see the outfits that we tried making. One of my close friends' mom was a seamstress, and she made bathing suits. So she always had leftover bathing suit material, and we would make spandex pants. We didn't know what we were doing, but we made our bright turquoise, and I remember I made myself a super bright pair of turquoise spandex pants. And from that swimsuit material, we thought we looked so cool. Oh my, so turquoise has always been one of my favorite colors. But we had a lot of fun. We always, when I talk with my girlfriends about the things that we did back when we were younger, we're like, oh my gosh, we should have started our own line of heavy metal clothing, because we couldn't find anything that we liked at the stores. So it was so much fun. Okay, moving on. The next step is I'm going to add the scrapbooking paper to the inside cover. And I'm going to trim it down to 8 by 7.5. Now, I only have one sheet of each, and it's okay. If you're lucky enough and you have two of the same scrapbooking papers, and you want to use a cardstock type of scrapbooking paper, something that's a little bit sturdy, try to avoid using a thin paper because the heavy cardstock will also help to strengthen your junk journal cover. And I'm writing down the measurements that I'm going to trim that paper down to, which is 8 inches. It's going to be 8 inches in height and 7.5 inches wide. And the reason I'm doing 7.5 inches wide is I wanted to overlap that center fold where the spine is, but I don't want it to go all the way across. So I'm going to take both of these papers. See, that's where I want it to end, at 7.5. I could have gone 7 inches. As long as it overlaps the crease mark of the spine, that is good enough. So 7.5 inches. And I'm going to trim both of them at the same time with my paper trimmer. The first cut I am going to make is my width cut. And that's because I have text, I have the cursive text on my scrapbooking paper, and I want to make sure that I cut it going in the right direction. So this will be 7 inches wide, and then the next cut will be 8 inches. And I'm trimming it to 8 inches in height because I do want a little border all around the inside of the cover. Remember, my cover is 8.5 inches in height. Therefore, my paper will be 8 inches, leaving a tiny little border of that fabric all the way around. Know your measurements in advance and jot them down. I can't stress that enough. So, cut once, measure twice. Or is it measure twice, cut once? Yes. You don't want to ruin pretty paper. Oh, so going back to our high school days of making our own clothes. So we would always talk about how we wanted to look, just like the rock stars that we would see on stage. But they had their clothes made for them. You know, these are stage clothes, and they had their own, probably their own designers making their clothes. I recently finished reading the book Cher, Part 1. It's her memoir. I cannot wait for Part 2. And Cher has always had her own personal style. And she made her own things, or she knew people that could sew. So she had her own ideas, and she would have them make her clothing. Because she really couldn't find what she wanted out in the stores. So that was us when we were in high school. I wish we would have pursued that. I'm just showing you how it is that I added the fabric to the center of the journal cover. And now I am going to glue the scrapbooking paper onto the inside cover. And I was just showing you how it is that they're going to overlap. I'm going to use a wet glue for this. And this one, I like the art glitter glue. It dries fast and it won't leave like that heavy glue beading, so that it kind of dries flat. Am I making sense? So this glue or the 3-in-1 glue or the fabric glue will work great because they dry flat. They won't leave lumpy lumps on the opposite side of the paper. I'm using a generous amount of glue because I want it to stick on there permanently, and I want the glue to be spread out evenly so that the glue marks don't show on the opposite side. Just remember what direction you're going to glue it down. So you will have a tiny border of that fabric just showing through, and see how that paper overlaps onto the spine but not over that second fold mark. And now with my spatula, I am going to smooth everything over, and it's pushing and smoothing the glue from the underside. If a little bit spews out, I will grab my towel and just clean up the excess. But I'd rather have more adhesive, especially around the edges, because you don't want those edges to lift once it's all said and done. The other thing you could do, you could use less adhesive and then do a stitch all around the perimeter of the journal. But I want this to be an easy junk journal cover to make. I am very carefully lifting up that front panel, just enough so that I can crease that fold mark. You can also use a bone folder and very gently, because the glue is still wet. So I'm basically just making the mark right now. So when it dries, it'll easily fold up. So just marking where that fold line is and then smoothing it down, and then I will let it completely dry. I will do the same thing with the second piece of scrapbooking paper. I'm going to go all around the edges and using the same generous amount of glue. Excuse me. And then when I glue this one down, I want to make sure that it's going in the right direction, and see how it overlaps onto that spine, but it won't overlap over that first fold mark. This will also help strengthen the spine, having those papers overlap onto the spine. Because what I usually do when I make covers from cereal boxes, there will be almost 7 layers of cardstock because I want it to be sturdy. So I usually add 2 or 3 cardstock layers on the outside and then about 2 more layers on the inside, because I want the journal covers to be really, really sturdy. Almost like a thick textbook type of journal cover. But they don't have to be that thick. And I realized that once I picked up my 2017 Christmas journal. I've had that one for 8 years and it lives on my bookshelf. I use it as reference every once in a while. And it's still going strong, and it felt so good in my hands. Very gently making that fold mark for that second panel. Using my scraper as a guide, very gently. The glue is still wet and I don't want the papers to shift. I will smooth everything out again and then clean up any excess glue that spews out from the edges. But it's really important for me to make sure that those edges are really pressed down. This paper is so pretty. It's a paper pad that I picked up. Oh, I can't remember if it was Joann's or not, but it's so pretty. It comes in different shades of blue, and then it has silver foil. It's the only paper pad I have with silver foil and not gold foil, but it is so pretty. I'm now going to take my pinking shears just to add a more decorative touch. And I am going to trim it on all sides. And only a little bit. I don't want to take off too much fabric because I want it to stay wide. So it goes over the entire inside spine. And then some of my cuts will be wonky, but I'll go back and I will clean it up. Having pinking shears really adds a nice little touch, a finishing touch to your projects. So now I'm going to do the same to the top and the bottom of this little strip of paper. I'm telling you, I am not a professional when it comes to fabric. I do the best I can. You're probably cringing as you're watching me make the cuts, but that's okay. You do what works best for you. And you know what? At the end, there's so many different steps to get to the finish line, so many different ways to get to the finish line, but at the end, we made it. And now I'm just going to clean it up because it's a little bit wonky. And I'm not looking for perfection. If that were the case, I would probably never finish my projects because I would be trying to redo them all the time. We just do the best we can. I'm reaching for a sip of my coffee. I just started drinking a coffee that has mushroom in it. It's like mushroom-based coffee. It's so good. I've had friends recommend it to me, and so I'm giving it a try, and it's really good. Oh my gosh, we had an earthquake. We had an earthquake this morning. And if I lost sleep, I couldn't sleep after that. I'm in Utah County, Utah. And we had an earthquake. I'll talk about that in a moment. I'm using glue stick to adhere the fabric onto the inside of the spine. And I'm using a little bit at a time so I can keep that little fabric piece even. And notice how I've positioned it evenly and centered it right over that inner spine. It was just shortly after midnight when I felt the shaking, and I thought it was, in my sleep. I thought it was just my dream. But it didn't stop. I want to tell you, it shook for a good amount of time. And then I jumped out of bed and I thought, oh no, that cannot be an earthquake. And it wouldn't stop shaking. And I was worried about the stuff that I have over my bed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hung that myself. Is it going to fall on my head? So I immediately jumped out of bed. Because I know I showed you a sneak peek of my bedroom in my previous video. I'll link that video up above. So I have artwork all up above my headboard. And it's pretty sturdy, but you just never know. So it was a 3.9 magnitude earthquake. And it was centered right around Provo, which is just south of where I am, maybe like 20 miles or so south. And it scared me, you guys, because I grew up in California. I grew up with earthquakes, and just because I grew up with them, it doesn't mean I'm used to them. I don't like them. And so to have them here in Utah is scary. And we have had them in the past. There was one that we had by Salt Lake about 5 years ago, and that one was pretty strong. I think it was like a 5.1 or something. So anyway, after it shook, I ran downstairs to check on my parents. They were fast asleep. They didn't even feel it. And then I came back upstairs, but I couldn't go to sleep anymore. So I tossed and turned for a really long time. And then I thought, if we get any aftershocks, I'm going to be ready. So I made sure that I had my shoes ready, my coat ready, anything I needed to run out of the house. Fortunately, we didn't have any aftershocks. Yeah, I don't. They're pretty scary. Okay, moving on to the journal. I grabbed 4 of the Tim Holtz book corners, and I'm adding them to all of the corners. These are pretty easy to bend, so I am just bending them down just slightly. I'm adding a little bit of glue in the photo corners just to make sure that they don't slide off. The glue just adds more holding power to the corners. And I am just bending it just a little bit, so when I go over with my pliers, I've already bent them, halfway. And I even press down with my fingers. Pressing down with your fingers isn't quite enough to keep them still, so you will need some pliers to press it down even more. And I'm using some pliers that are flat on the inside. I do have some other pliers that have little ridges, but I don't want it to leave the little ridge marks. I have though, and it's not a big deal. But if you have some that have that that smooth metal inside, those are best. It will leave a little bit of the pinching marks. Not a big deal. I could have positioned fabric, like squeezed fabric between to keep the metal from pinching, but it wasn't too bad. And I don't have that much strength, so it's not like I'm going to make some major damage. I always say photo corners. Book corners are completely optional. If you look back at my 2017 journal, I did not use book corners. Book corners didn't come into play until a few years later, after I had started. So book corners are completely optional. I was having a conversation with my sister the other day, and one of the reasons why I am making this video is so that you can make an inexpensive junk journal to junk journal in, because a lot of the feedback I'm getting is that many of us, including me, I'm guilty of it, are not junk journaling in the junk journals that we buy because they're too precious. I get you. I know what you mean. So I was telling my sister, I'm like, I'm going to do this video so everyone can make their own junk journal using inexpensive supplies, using junk. Okay, we're going to use leftover fabric. We're going to use packaging. And then if we have all of the other little embellishments, then we can embellish, but it is optional. I am going to add eyelets for the closure. This, again, is also optional because you can easily tie a ribbon around your junk journal to keep it closed. But if you want to do eyelets, do the eyelets. Again, the whole purpose of this video is so that you can make your own junk journal from junk by repurposing, packaging, and then using whatever papers you have, and then creating signatures so that you can begin to junk journal in your journal, because I think that we are more inclined to create in the junk journals that we make for ourselves rather than the ones that we buy for ourselves. I don't know why that happens, but I have many junk journals that I have purchased, and there's only one that I've actually junk journaled in. All the others live pretty on my bookshelf because they are a beautiful piece of art. So I end up making my own journals to journal in. I know, isn't that crazy? But I know we all do it because I hear what you're telling me. You're commenting, you're telling me that you're doing the same thing too. So let's make our own inexpensive journals so that we can journal or junk journal in them. These are wide eyelets, and they were from We Are MK. I think they've changed their name now, Memory Keepers, and that's where I got mine. I am out of the gold ones, and I'm still doing a no spend. I'm trying not to spend anything on craft supplies right now because I need to use up what I have. And I did go to Daiso when I was in LA, and I picked up some really cute things. But other than that, I have not stepped foot in any craft store this year. Can you believe that? Nor have I done any online shopping. Unbelievable. Well, when it comes to craft supplies, because I've got plenty, and especially because I don't have room to bring in other things. I have an island of supplies in my office, right in the center of the room. It's like it looks like a little island, and I'm trying to find homes for all those things. And so, yeah, I can't be bringing anything else in. I thought while I'm adding eyelets, let me add one to the top of the spine so that I have it ready just in case I decide to add a dangle. It is ready to go. This is also optional because if you have a bull clip, you can attach your dangle with a bull clip or even a paper clip. So adding this eyelet is completely optional, but if you have the tools, let's use the tools. Doesn't that look so pretty? I just love this so much. This process took me about an hour. I did step away for about 25 minutes because I went downstairs to help my mother with dinner. She wanted me to make some rice. So I was gone for about 25 minutes while I did that. And so the reason I tell you how long it takes me is so that you can prepare if you want to do it in one go and you have all of your supplies ready. It should not take you more than an hour to create a junk journal cover like this one. I hadn't added the eyelet to that first cover, so I went ahead and did it to this one. And notice how I'm using two different size of eyelets. Well, the little hole is actually the same size, but it doesn't have that little frame around it. I love this one with the florals and the cheetah. I love that cheetah paper so much. I can't wait to finish these. And I may not show the process. Maybe I will. If you want to see how I add the signatures to this, maybe I will. You know what? I think I will show how I add the signatures. It is one of the questions I get asked a lot. So I will work on the signatures for this junk journal, and I'll do a slow process video. This is the part where I stepped away for about 25 minutes, and it also gave me time, or gave the journal time so that it can fully dry. I just put two heavy items on top, and now 25 minutes later, it is nice and sturdy. I'd probably leave it overnight before I begin to add the signatures. Plus, I still need time to select all of the papers. But there's nothing wrong with moving forward and adding the signatures immediately after. I'm now going to use some of this beautiful, this is a silk ribbon. I think it's a silk ribbon. It's like silky and satiny. It's a beautiful ribbon. And I think this color coordinates well. I'll use it for now. If I feel later that I need to change the color of the ribbon, I will. That teal one on the left-hand side is so pretty. That one's 100% silk. I was going to use that one too, so I grabbed the two to see which color coordinates best. I showed a video on my Instagram as to how I store my ribbons. I'll show you. I'll insert a picture so that you can see how I store my ribbons. Oh my gosh, it's pretty crazy, but I don't have any other option. And so now I'm going to add a closure to this one. You know, this ribbon, looking at it on screen, it would have coordinated really well, but I went ahead and used the same color for the first one. I have a phone call coming in, but oh look, it's my friend Scam. You guys know Scam, right? We're gonna ignore Scam. Yeah, this ribbon looks really pretty, but once I get it all, you know, maybe I'll embellish the front covers even more, and then once I add all of the pages, I'll check again to see how well this ribbon coordinates. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you love it, share my video with your family and friends, especially someone who would like to make a super easy and cute junk journal cover. I am going to leave you with a little video to show you an up close of these journal covers. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment section below. But look at that. And of course, I'm showing you what my full craft table looks like. You know what? It is a workshop. And I love it. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time. Bye.